Dr. Soeharno, please come to the stage. And shortly CV from Dr. Soeharno. He is a lecturer of Department Agribusiness Faculty Economic and Management at IPB University. And also he is the President of Agribusiness Association in Indonesia. And I would like to invite all speakers. First, Mr. Eduardo Pedrosa, Secretary General of PECC Singapore. Next, Professor Christopher Finlay. And I would like to invite Mrs. Yani Sugiarto as Operation Manager Binus Apple Academy. And I would like to invite Mrs. Yudit Dwi Anggraini, Human Capital Senior Advisor from Telkom. And the time is yours.
So good morning, everyone. It's on behalf of the committee, I thank for being here and participating in this seminar. Human resource development is ever challenging issues. And it is more challenging if the future is unpredictable, volatile, and even disruptive. Responding to these situations, Indonesia has, as we have followed, prepared Indonesian Development Forum 2019, and there are 8 teams, and one of this team is development of human capital in Indonesia. IPB University is, as a part of Indonesian education system, is called to respond this calling. And today, we are trying to manifest to our response by conducting the seminar in cooperation with Badan. As education institution, of course, our business is mainly on focus on designing the curriculums, which is very related to providing and offering future skills. And since this question should be addressed from many perspectives, we are purposefully inviting resource persons, which is, we do believe, which is credible and resourceful on that issues. And it is the background of this panel discussions. We are pleased today to have resourceful persons coming from various backgrounds. First of all, I would like to introduce Professor Christopher Finlay, which is professor at Adelaide University. Welcome, Professor. Professor Finlay is economist, and if I'm not mistaken, understand, yeah, economist from Australian University, Australian National University. Has many, at least contact with Dr. Nunu, and that's why we are happy to invite and hopefully get many informations coming from his expertise. The second speakers in our panel discussion is Mr. Eduardo Pedrosa. Yes, he is Secretary General of Pacific Economic Cooperation Council. Yes, it is a tripartite organization based on with home base at Singapore. If in Indonesia it is comparable to CSIS, so it is think tanks organizations composing of government and academia and private sectors. The next speakers, so welcome, Professor. The next speaker is Ibu Yeni Sugiarto, which is who is representing Apple Binus Academy. Yes. She is on academic on formal training, is a psychologist, I think, and has many experience on developing education and trainings, and mainly in Binus. And so, welcome, Ibu. And then the fourth speaker is Ibu Yudit Dwi Anggraini, who is senior advisor PT Telkom. She is, I think, she is economist and communications. Your formal training is economics and with also a series of experiences in field of human resource development. So we are now having four precious resource persons with this willingly and happily will be sharing with us his expertise, opinion on our future scale and future jobs. And so let's begin our discussion. Just technical matters. The discussion will be held maybe, or not maybe, it's until 12. Yeah, until 12, and it will be divided into two big sessions. First is presentation session, and the second is discussion. Presentation session will be divided into 4 sessions. The first will be Bapak Pedrosa will speaking, and then Professor Christopher, and then Ibu Yeni, and the fourth will be Ibu Yudit. Each will be presenting more or less 15 minutes, and afterward the session will be open for discussion. So, to making short, I invite Bapak Pedrosa to present his material. Yours, please.
Thank you very much, for your very kind introduction. Pak Nonom, thank you very much for your very kind invitation. Pak Mahatmi, thank you very much for having us here and inviting us to be part of this sharing. I wish that I spoke Bahasa Indonesia. I think when I was looking at your slides, I felt there was so much I could learn there. Do we have a controller, or do I? It might be easier if I just control it from here, if possible. So it was interesting. I was listening to the description of the Indonesia Development Forum, and I was looking at the different sub-themes and priorities, and I was wondering how do I tie it all together? And I was thinking there are a couple of different elements, I think, that I'll be talking about today. One, of course, is the human capital element, but there's another thing by complete coincidence, because I didn't know what the themes were, but it's the structural transformation part and the structural policies that we need to adopt in response to those changes. But really, that's what I'm doing here. I'm crystal ball gazing. We're talking a lot about the future, and it's a future that I really have to confess to you, we really don't know. You know, there's so many predictions out there, we just don't know what's happening. The speed of change is so fast, the adoption is different, its impact across different economies is very different. I will be talking to you primarily from a regional and Asia-Pacific perspective. I'll be giving you ideas from what people in the broader region think, and so I think the challenge is, how do you apply that in the specific context in Indonesia? So, this is a picture that we have, and it's how we imagine the future of work might look like. So you see in the top left someone working with a server. In the bottom, in the middle left, one of these smart health watches. Does anyone have one of these? Are you monitoring your health? What are the implications of that for the future of work? And then in the bottom left, you see a doctor. The doctor is using an iPad. He's not using paper. How important is that for the future? I think we all think that the future of work will look very, very different. For Christopher, in the top right hand, how will teaching happen? Will it be in the traditional format, or will it be very, very different? We just, I think, don't know the answer. I'll be leaning very heavily on some survey work that we did last year on the future of work. We did this in the middle of last year. We are not surveying public opinion, we are surveying the policy community. So these are senior level government officials, businesses, and academics, civil society, and researchers. This is about 530 of them across the Asia Pacific. They include people from North America, Northeast Asia, Oceania, Pacific South America, and Southeast Asia, where we come from. And then there are a few others. A lot of them come from the academic sector, but also civil society and the media, but also businesses and governments. Because often when it comes to these surveys, we hear a lot about what businesses might think, but we don't often hear what academic stakeholders and what government officials think about these issues. So the very first slide I wanted to talk about was expectations for growth. We talk a lot about this volatility, the uncertainty, complexity. And so one of the things that we note in last year's survey is an expectation overall that global growth will be slower. And one of the questions is why? Why is that growth going to be slower? So we asked the question, what are the risks to growth? So, you talked about the technological change, the fourth industrial revolution. But there's another element in here, which is the challenges to globalization, the challenges to trade. And that comes out very strongly in our survey, that part of the uncertainty is around the uncertainty of the trading system. So the top risk to growth was in fact protectionism and the possibility of trade wars. There are issues of corruption, there are issues of trade growth, slowdowns in China, but also concerns about political leadership. So these are very interesting things to add to this broader debate. I wanted to focus for a minute on this issue of protectionism. We see over the past few years, this has been steadily growing. And this adds to that sense of uncertainty. What will markets look like? What are the markets we can export to, and what will happen? And this, I think, is underpinned partially by the rising inequality we see in some countries, but also, I think, a fear of what technology is doing, and I think that really underscores the importance of the discussions we are having here today. So when we talk about the fourth industrial revolution, what does it actually mean? What are the technologies that are involved? So we asked the question 2 years ago, which technologies do you think will impact your economies the most? And interestingly, what came out on top was big data. Now we can discuss a bit more later what we mean by that. But also the second was something a little more practical that we are more familiar with, mobile-based payment systems. I'm a little bit old-fashioned. I still use cash, but I see many young people here. You probably just use your mobile phone for payments. That has significant, I think, impacts on growth. AI is another thing back there. Down at the bottom, something quite interesting is blockchain. We hear about blockchain all the time. I saw a sign next door that there's a seminar on blockchain happening. But for some reason, people didn't think about blockchain too much. And the reason is I think that we're not sure what blockchain actually means. There's a lot of uncertainty, a lack of understanding about what it is. So I hope the technologists can explain to me what it is. And if we did this survey again, maybe this result will be totally different. We asked the question, how do you think technological change will impact jobs by 2030? So not next year, not in 5 years, but over 13 years. And the results were quite interestingly that overall survey respondents were negative. So more people thought there would be a loss of jobs than they thought there would be a creation of jobs. But very interestingly, North Americans were in fact positive. They thought there would be more jobs created because of technological change. But for us in Southeast Asia, we were very negative at this point in time last year. And the question is why? When we thought about this, when we saw the survey results, one thing that we thought of was maybe the systems that they have in place are more developed, they're mature, they have more vocational training, they have more social security systems in place, the labor markets are more developed. So I think this is the challenge for us in Southeast Asia. Don't wait for 2030. Let's start working on those things now. But overall, looking at the labor market, it's not that helpful. So we also asked according to different industrial classifications, trying to understand which sectors will be impacted the most. And I'm very, very selfish when it comes to these things. I have 2 young children, and I'm very worried about, what they're going to ask me, what job should I do? So I was trying to find out what advice I would give to them. But interestingly, what we see there is there is an expectation that there will be jobs created. There are jobs, but what are they? They're going to be in the professions. They're going to be in the arts, in health, in ICT, in education. But at the bottom, there's an expectation there'll be fewer jobs in manufacturing, fewer jobs in mining, fewer jobs in agriculture, but it will be very different. The impacts are different depending on your economy, what your resource endowments are, and what your demographic structures are. So we also asked the question, similarly by occupation. And these occupations are ordered in a certain way. So we used the standard ILO classifications here. At the top is how the ILO looks at, the most skills-intensive jobs, and at the bottom, the less skills-intensive. And again, you see a similar pattern to the last slide. Skills-intensive jobs, there will be more. So don't look at this with pessimism, look at this with a lot of optimism. There will be jobs created, but you're gonna have to upskill for that. But also very interestingly for people from Bapenas, I think, is if you look at the middle sector. So there's an expectation that the clinical support workers, a few clerical people, there will be some job losses, but there are jobs being created in that middle skill segment. And what are they? These are caring for the elderly, some protective services and so on, and some skill. So you can't look at this in an overall macro way. The approach has to be very, very granular. If you look at the bottom, those skills have those occupations, there's an expectation that there will be job losses. And when we look at this intuitively, these are the jobs that can most easily be automated. That's the simple explanation, if you like. But that doesn't mean there won't be jobs. But really importantly, the way to look at this, we thought, was to not just look at the impact of technology on jobs, but whether or not we will have a shortage of workers to fill those jobs being created, and in which sectors there will be surpluses of workers. So these are the imbalances, if you like, in the labor market. So in the northwest quadrant, there are jobs where we think there will be fewer jobs, but there's going to be a surplus of workers. And that's a concern, I think, for policymakers and for individuals. In the northwest, there are a couple of jobs categories where there will be more jobs, but we'll have a surplus of workers. So, think about that as well. One quadrant, fewer jobs and a shortage of workers, very, very strange. where if you think about there will be job losses, but there won't be people to fill it. And if you look at that, there's only one job occupation. I don't know if you want to guess what that is overall, but since we're here in IPB, it was in fact skilled agricultural workers. Very strange. So we have to think about that a little bit more. You know, do we need to upskill to get basically more productive agriculture? And that this is where the jobs are being created. We have more jobs, but there's an expectation there'll be a shortage of workers. So this is where I think the education system has to work very quickly to upskill people and help the people make that transition. So very quickly to identify that, the Northwest Quadrant is where we expect there to be surpluses, but also job losses. The Southeast Quadrant, where there will be jobs created, but a deficit, a shortage of people. So the challenge, and it's very different depending on the economy, as I said, is to make that transition. How do you make that transition? So I'm looking here that we need more of this. I think we need to help people make that move. So clerical support workers are not going to become necessarily CEOs, but there are other things that they can do to encourage entrepreneurship and innovation and others. But there are also some people who won't be able to make that transition. So again, when we talked about social policy, I think Christopher will talk to that. So the thing that I wanted to highlight was the need for structural reforms for that transition. So to define structural reforms, what do we mean by that? These are policies these are domestic policies, institutions that affect the operation of markets. The EU has its own definition, but I just wanted to zero in on this idea that efficient labor and education markets are critical, I think, to minimize this disruption, but also to maximize the benefits that we can have from this technology. And very important underscoring all of that is to understand what's happening, the labor market and education market signals. How does Patnonan understand what the young people want? How does he respond to that? What are the courses, what are the curricula that need to be designed in anticipation of those new jobs? But there's a problem, and this is again looking at the surveys that we do. There is a fear, I think, amongst the policy community that the failure to implement structural reforms is a risk to growth. So a very strong message we would have is on the importance of the Indonesia Development Forum, to really encourage those kinds of structural reforms that will help people get into those jobs. How do we do that? That's something that we've seen across the whole Asia-Pacific region. But again, the question is, what are the areas? What structural reforms? That's a very broad thing. So according to our surveys, the top issue that needed structural reform was innovation and entrepreneurship. That's the area where we really need to focus and get the policies to help in this process. And the second was education and labor. We need to look at that. And I'll focus on that as I close up. So what about education and labor? It's a very, very big topic. So we asked our survey respondents, are you satisfied with these things in your economies? And interestingly, we saw a lot of dissatisfaction across the entire Asia-Pacific. This is not about Indonesia, this is the entire APEC region. And the top one, and I'm very interested on the rest of our panel today, is the match between educational training and the needs of the economy. People are very unhappy with that. And very much related to that, and I'll be interested to hear from Yeni on this, is cooperation between education providers, IPB here, and employers. How does that conversation take place? What are the structural policies that need to be put in to help facilitate that conversation? What are the incentives to get businesses to talk to you? What are the incentives to get that training to happen? There are a lot of questions out there. There are other issues there, the traditional labor market issues, wage and working hour flexibility, and so on. But I wanted to highlight those top two to you. Now this is the world, we used a lot of WEF data in the two, in our keynote speeches. And this is where Indonesia sits in the broader APEC region in terms of Pillar 6 of the World Economic Forum's Global Competitiveness Index, somewhere in the middle. So not the best, but not the worst. Indonesia does quite well. But what are the areas in that Pillar 6 that perhaps Indonesia needs to work on? It would be helpful to have a conversation in the IDF about. So very interestingly to look at this, Indonesia does very, very well, I think. 100 is global best. So Indonesia is very close to global best on the people-to-teacher ratio. You're very good at school life expectancy, but when we move down that, staff training is an issue. And very interestingly, and we need to hear from the employers on this, is ease of finding skilled employees. Indonesia is going through its demographic bonus. You've got to have a young, working-age population, but do they have the right skills? According to this survey, businesses have a hard time to find people with the right skills. And again, we talked earlier about vocational training, the critical thinking in IR 4.0. Those are areas we think that Web suggests are there for improvement. Now, again, coming back to the PEC survey and the work that we do, we asked the question, we used the same web categories, but we wanted to understand specifically for our region, what are the harder skills to find in the region by 2030? The top was critical thinking. We don't know what the specific technical skills are, but we know that critical thinking will be important in IR 4.0. And people told us this is very hard to find. Problem solving, very hard to find. The other skills were not so bad. Service orientation, quality control, coordinating with others, people management, we didn't do too badly in the Asia Pacific region. But the top 5 were very problematic. So I'm going to conclude there by just saying that we live in a very complex global policy environment, whether it's the technology issues, whether it's trade policy, whether it's FTAs, it's a very complex word. So I like that you use that VUCA, this volatility, uncertainty, complexity acronym. But there's this fear of the unknown, and I think the work that we need to do is to reduce that fear, to explain what we need to do in response to that. I'll emphasize that the perceptions differ across the whole Asia-Pacific region of the impact of IR 4.0 on jobs. For some reason in East Asia, we tend to be more negative than those in, say, North America. I'll focus on that one question is how do you transition people into those job occupations that we know, think there will be more jobs in, and I'll emphasize the importance of the structural policies. So labor and education, and that, again, the cooperation between employers and the education providers. Critical thinking and problem solving are seen as important. There are common challenges, but again, the response differs. What suits Indonesia will be very different from my country, the Philippines, will be different for Singapore as well. But my parting message is that we do think that regional cooperation will be important to develop effective practices and partnerships. So there's a lot of work going on to develop skills councils. A lot of countries are developing skills councils in response to these changes. So again, what can we learn from each other? How do these skills councils work? What are the operations? How do they talk to business? But don't just think domestically about this. Think regionally, because there are so many lessons we can learn from each other. And in this world, in this global world that we live in, labor markets and skills markets and tasks are more global. So I'll be there and apologize for being a little time. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pedrosa. And now it's time for Professor Finlay. It's yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, and good morning, everybody. It's lovely for me to be here again in Bogor. I have lost count of the number of times I've been here to IPB. Dr. Nunung and I have been working together when I looked like that. So I'm very pleased to have that historical picture up on the screen. I'm going to talk today to remarks which are prepared by my colleague. His name is Kostas Mavromaris. You can see his name on this slide. He works at the University of Adelaide, where he runs a centre on the future of employment and skills. And I think you'll find that Professor Mavromaris is a terrific resource for this project and for the development forum that's coming. I'm talking to his remarks too because he was a participant in the planning and execution of the tech work that Eduardo has spoken to you about. So what he's going to do is to reflect on his perceptions of the results of the survey that Ed has spoken to you about. He apologises to you today for not being here, but his commitments in Adelaide made it difficult for him to come to this meeting, but let's work to see if he can join on another occasion. So he says that he's, having taken a close look at the survey results, what he wants to do is to reflect on the new problems that emerge in labour economics due to technology and globalisation, related especially to labour mobility and the matching of skills. And what he wants to do is to think about a new policy framework to identify the problems that are going to be identified. So what he does in this presentation is, starting from the State of the Region material, he asks what are the changes that are forecast to happen. He's particularly interested in the question of whether the region is in crisis due to the digital and automation revolution. He focuses a lot on three major institutions that he says matters a great deal. These are work, education and social care. More about that in a moment. He offers some thoughts about their role, and he concludes very strongly with a message about the importance of having an integrated policy response. The context is that three main points have been made about the future of work. As Eduardo said, we're in a period of fast and deep change and quite uncertain environment, maybe more so than we've known to date. That will have a lot of effects, and again, Professor Mavromaris is arguing that the solutions and responses cannot be piecemeal. They must be nationally tailored and strongly integrated. In the SOTR, oh, did I go too far? No. In the SOTR, there's a result that technology is expected to have a profound impact on the future of work. He says this is not news, and the evidence keeps building, and some reports offer brave predictions based on speculation in the midst of much uncertainty. But what he says is important about the State of the Region report is that it highlights the region's unique position and huge diversity, and it quantifies the expected impacts of technology on the future of work and its workforces. And Eduardo's taken you through those results in details. What he does then is identify these three core institutions that he says will have to be engaged in order to achieve a digital transformation. And this is labour, the labour market, education and social care. So his first main question: are we faced with a crisis? Almost certainly, he says, yes, we are faced with a crisis. It will be unavoidable. Digitalisation and automation are changing changing far too many parameters and far too quickly for us to make a smooth transition. So we face very uncertain outcomes given that portfolio of technology that we saw before. And that portfolio of technology keeps creating consequences that we don't anticipate and which were unintended. So there's a considerable uncertainty, a point that Eduardo also made. So if you accept that proposition that we are facing a very serious challenge, if not a crisis, how can we contain and manage that situation? There's a lot we don't know in order to answer that question, but he's asserting in this presentation that action is very important. The future will be kinder to those who decide early and act strongly. There will be losses of jobs, there will also be gains, and again you've seen that in Eduardo's presentation. Action will require quantifying the change, and so there's some important research to do to build on the survey that you've already seen. But it will also require focusing on institutions and principles rather than specific solutions to immediate problems. The The response will be about managing this change. It will be about managing change in order to convert a crisis into an opportunity for faster development supported by technology. Clearly there is an opportunity here because these technologies are creating massive productivity increases which can be captured and turned into income. So there is an opportunity story. So we want to achieve that productive change, but we want to do it in a way which is ethically and socially responsible and safe. We want to reward the winners and we want to look after what he calls the left behinds. So a reminder, the three core institutions: education, labour markets and social policy. So this is like a short mission statement for each of these institutions. Education and training has to deliver the new skills for the digital jobs. It'll have to get good at handling fast change and being up to date in what core skills are required in the workforce. The labour markets are going to have to do a good job of matching jobs and skills, and they're going to have to develop new models of working. And social policy have to be ready to manage the left behinds and have a national discussion about how best to do that. So the next step in this presentation then is to look quickly at those three components: education, work and social care. With respect to education, the observation is made that technology is going to require lots of new skills, and that's going to mean we're going to think differently about school, about vet and about university. We're going to have to make education more connected to the workplace. I was brought up and I have basically a single degree, and that was what I took out at the start of my working life. And after that I accumulated my own experience which I built on that single degree. Maybe that's a very old-fashioned way of education. Maybe what we're going to do now is have a series of short bursts throughout our lives. Maybe there won't be a single foundation degree, maybe there'll be some core skills, and that's why I'm so looking forward to hearing about the Apple Academy, which I think is the sort of institution that's going to be important for delivering those skills. People like Dr. Nunung and I, who live in very traditional institutions at this stage, are going to have to think about how we work ourselves. So technology will keep changing the types of skills it requires, and it's going to be difficult to predict. So we wouldn't want to invest a whole lot of capacity in a specific set of skills because, you know, the fact that we're making that investment on the basis of an observation that there's a shortage will probably lead to a technological change that makes that shortage removed, and we will have educated all these people in skills which are no longer in demand. So we're going to have to be very careful about how we make our choices. My colleague concludes this discussion by saying perhaps we need a new national skills framework, and that's a nice idea, and I think it goes to Ed's observation that many countries are creating national skills councils, and I imagine that's the sort of thing that a council would work on. And if that is the case in Indonesia, then Eduardo also makes the very important point that there's a lot to gain from regional cooperation in that respect. Number two, work. So the demand for labour is changing, you've seen that already. Workplaces have to cope with change, there's lots of questions about the skills required and how new quality jobs are going to create. So a suggestion out of this discussion is to say not only may we valuably create a national skills framework, but it's important for us to have a conversation about the future of work. He's at pains in this presentation to keep attention on the opportunity side of technological change. And as you saw, the package of technologies in play here is not only about robots and the possibility of robots replacing particular tasks which actually we might be very happily replaced by robots because they're dirty, dangerous and boring. Let the robots do those jobs, let us do the more interesting ones. But he's at pains to say it's not only robotic technology which is at work here, there are lots of other things happening. And he says, for example, let's look at the technology that's made possible the creation of these platforms which are bringing together consumers and suppliers in a much more efficient way. And he says that creates new opportunities for employment, and maybe transiting the informal sector into a formal sector. Now, I was at a meeting yesterday in Jakarta. We were talking about the service sector, and we had a terrific presentation from one of the leaders of the Gojek organisation. And she told a marvellous story about the consequences of the creation of that platform for job creation, business growth and opportunities, especially opportunities for women, and the social consequences of those opportunities. It was quite a striking story. Another example of the upside is the possibility for telecommuting. And some of you may have been following the writing of a gentleman called Richard Baldwin. He has a new book called Globalization, and the Globalization book I commend to you because it's about the possibility that white-collar service jobs in developed economies could be transferred to be provided from developing economies by the use of telecommuting technology. So there are opportunities that sit alongside the substitutions. The third dimension in this package of institutions which he's urging us to pay attention to is social care. We know that there are going to be job losses. We don't really know how many and when that's going to happen, and so it's important to have a social care system that manages the people who are displaced and supports them. Otherwise, that's unfair, immoral, and practically will make the management of change much more difficult if we're not also assisting those who are facing the biggest adjustment to do so. But the question is, who's going to do that? How will it be provided? Who will it be provided? What incentives are there to build the system? So these are important questions to resolve in the context of these changes. The final point he makes is that we have to think about each of these three core national institutions at the same time. It's going to be very important to have an integrated approach. We need a policy chain as well as a value chain. We need an integrating approach which will allow us to fix problems and weaknesses along the way in a cost-effective manner. Professor Mavromaris' assessment is that education, labour and social care are all important, and the effectiveness of our response will be as strong as the weakest link in the chain of these institutions. Other things matter too, and he mentions some here, but his bottom line is that integration matters. Thank you very much.
Exactly 15 minutes. Thank you very much, Professor. And now at this, we turn to Ibu Jenny, please. Yours.
Thank you, Pat. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much to IPB, Pak Nunung, Ibu Mei. It's been an honor for us invited to this event so we can meet Ibu Ami. Good morning, and also all the informative resources here. We have Mr. Finlay, Mr. Eduardo, and Bu Yudit. Nice to meet all of you, as well as all the great audience here. Selamat pagi. Okay, I'm Yeni. I'm from Apple Developer Academy, working together with Apple, working together with Venus. So here I try to share a little bit about future skills and future jobs as our main theme today. So I'm talking about digital era and digital transformation. If we can see the revolutions of digital, starting from the primitive society, agricultural revolutions, I think it took like probably 1,000 years to go to the second wave, which is agricultural society, right? But then from agricultural society, it took probably 100 years until we come up to industrial society. From there, the third wave, going to information society. But nowadays, we are in the fourth wave. in the ubiquitous society, probably it's not like taking years. It's just like probably this month, next month we have something new already. So it's getting fast, right? Years or maybe months. So these digital transformations, it's from the technology, it's also changing our culture and changing the society as well because of the process. So if we can see, probably back then, when we do not have this gadget, our culture is different. We say hi face to face. Now we can just use our phone, right? So that kind of culture is also different. Now I have one short video, so it's like around 1 minute, for us to really see how the technology impact the cultures change.
Throughout the years, shopping experience have constantly developed progressively. Now, what else is there to offer? JDID presents JDID X.
Bukan iklan ini ya.
Have you ever been in a hurry that you want to just walk through a store, grab what you need, and walk out? But wait, how does it work? Open your JDID app, go to my account, and tap on JDIDX. It will generate a QR code, match your facial profile, and your ID is confirmed through face recognition. So all you need is your smartphone, and you can start shopping. This is made possible using AI technology, face recognition, and radio frequency identification. RFID tag is attached to the product. So the checkout terminal will ID you through face recognition, add up your total purchase, and charge your credit card. Oh, and we'll send your transaction detail straight to your smartphone. Manless, cashless, the future of retailing. JDID, advancing Indonesia.
Wow. Udah ada belum di Indonesia? It's not advertisement ya. It's just giving us an example, and it's happened here in Indonesia. We have one in Pantai Indah Kapuk in Jakarta already, and soon probably definitely Bogor, Jabodetabek will be their first main areas to enter. So we have to be ready. We're not bringing any bags anymore. We're not bringing any cash anymore. So it means the cultures change a lot, right? That's digital transformations. If we can see back then, we keep on all our files using the flash disk, bringing the hard drive. Now so we have the cloud, right? Just now, the technology that JDID is using, face recognitions, they are using also artificial intelligence. All those are the technology that they're using, right? Machine learning, Swift. So this is all the digital transformations. This is the face. Just now, in the morning, Ibu Ami has shared with us definitely to make it more efficient, cost efficiency. It shortened the process, right? But cost reductions and to grow the profit definitely. But then, this is also what Mr. Eduardo shared with us. With the technology, we have to be ready, like a lot of jobs declining, yeah? But new jobs appear, right? Data analysts, scientists, machine learning specialists, those are the future jobs. Probably not future jobs, it's now, right? What they are trying to aim. We have to be ready with this. These are the top 10 emerging jobs, but we have also 10 declining jobs that we have to be ready. It will disappear. We don't really need data entry anymore. If you can see, when we enter a highway, it's just using the card, right? People card, flash, breeze. So means we're declining a lot of jobs that's not necessarily there. We have to be ready with this. So, means we have to equip with the 2022 skills outlook, right? What we need to grow. Problem solving, analytic thinking, creativity, collaborations, how to be a learner, how to be a teachers, long life learners. Those are the skills that we have to build in us, right? We don't really need, those are the declining skills that we don't need, like memorizing things. You have to be stiff with certain rules, because as we know in the first few slides, our changes in technology, it happens like even in months or years, right? So if we just stick with one thing, definitely it's gonna be hard. So here, Apple Developer Academy, we are trying to create the world-class developers who give all of Indonesian, especially for our first 2 years, to be ready to be the world-class developers. We are preparing the skills to think big. We are the third in the world. We have Australia, we have Italy and Brazil, and the third one in the world, and the first one in Asia. So Indonesia is the first country for Apple Developer Academy. First is in BSD, working together with BINUS, but it's open already in Surabaya, Universitas Ciputra, and soon will be in Batam. So Academy is a 1-year program, while everyone, means 18 years old plus without any limit, who can really commit 4 hours per day to learn with us, not only about the coding, not only to be a developers, but world-class developers, to think also about the business skills, to think also about the impact for the community, how to solve problems. So those who join our program, they also eligible to join the scholarship program to attend WWDC, the yearly conference by Apple. This is our student who joined our academy and selected to go to Cupertino, WWDC, to attend the last year conference. This year, we have 5 students who won WWDC. They just got their visa just now, this morning. So they will go on the 3rd of June until 7th of June to attend WWDC. It's a yearly conference where they can get the first informations about technology from Apple. So when they won the scholarship, starting from the ticket, accommodations, even their daily compensate will be provided by Apple. So these are the skills that we have to sharpen in ourselves. Creativity, collaborations,